I first of all want to send my deepest appreciation to every single one of the artists involved in this show. Make some noise for the artists one more time, 100%. Now please make some noise for Kavi and Chanel and the entire team at Kavi Gupta. They've really been so gracious in their dedication to the art of the people, and in this space that is so often been used to alienate and exploit, it's really a blessing to have people willing to put art above profit and above themselves, you know. In the concept of this show, which we call Skin and Masks, Decolonizing Our Art Beyond the Politics of Visibility, I was primarily inspired by Frantz Fanon's seminal text, Black Skin, White Masks, published in 1952. In Black Skin, White Masks, Fanon dissects the psychological ramifications and impact of colonialism, racism, white supremacy, etc. And so many of his observations from the early 50s are so pertinent in this moment today. I think what struck me most deeply about Black Skin, White Masks is having the language for a gnawing feeling that I've always had, that our insistence upon race is fictional, that this is a social construct. And these are concepts that have become very popular in this moment, thanks in part to people like Fanon. And in so many words, he's arguing in this book that the flattening of our humanity into colors, black and white, is limiting of our truth, and is ultimately a barrier that has to be overcome for our freedom. That's the point, the basis of this show and of these ideas, are that our freedom cannot be dictated by the same rules as our oppression. Audre Lorde has a famous quote that says, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." And the weaponization of epidermis and skin color are the master's primary tools. So there's a quote that is in the book that is possibly on the wall, because all of these are passages from the book, where he says, right there, actually, next to Kendrick McFarlane's piece, "It is not the black world that governs my behavior. My black skin is not a repository for specific values." I wanted to pose my first question to you, Gerald. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the ways that you and your contemporaries in the AFRICOBRA movement sought to defy stereotypes expected of you because you are black artists?
Well, as you know, that period of time was really pivotal in the civil rights movement. It was a period that was long in coming, on the backs of those who came before, specifically in the Harlem Renaissance, where there was a breakthrough movement of artists, black artists, to forge their own destiny and to create outside of the parameters set by the establishment. So when we get together very informally and casually to just talk about things going on in general, the war in Vietnam, the riots that were taking place, and the general instability in Chicago. A question came up, well, what should we as artists do to contribute in some way to what was going on. You know, obviously we weren't revolutionaries. You know. In the popular sense of the word revolutionary, we will do what artists do. We'll create art. But we felt that it was a chance to have a breakthrough moment of our own, to just kind of like tear up the rules and regulations that come out of formal education in art schools. We said, well, what does that mean? You know, well, we'll deal with images that emanate within our community. We'll use color in a certain way that reflects the general colors, bright colors that were becoming more and more popular. So we use color as kind of like the linchpin for establishing some principles that we would experiment or explore, such as how line is used, how we organize compositions, how we create images that are not completely natural, as is typical with realism, is probably a better way of putting it. Let's produce work that's kind of like halfway between realism and abstraction. Abstraction, pure abstraction, which was and still is a very important part of the general genre in the art world. We didn't dismiss totally, but we felt that it was an important to look between abstraction and realism and see what we come up with. So we came up with some guiding principles that kind of helped us along. That's a lot.
100%. I wanted to ask a question based on your time in Africa. I'm Ghanaian and just returned from Ghana about a month ago. And the collaboration and communication between Black people globally is one of the primary themes in my work as an artist, in this show, and in my understanding of my own life. I recognize that having a direct communication to my ancestry is this phenomenal blessing that I've been given, that most of the people closest to me on this planet have had stolen from them. And in some of our conversations, you've told me about your time in Nigeria at the festival Festac. I wanted to ask you, in what ways your experiences in Africa impacted your ideas of identity and self-expression?
Festac was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. For those of you who don't know, Festac is an acronym for Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture. The Festac in 1977, I went as a member of AFRICOBRA. We were invited to participate. It was really a mind-blowing experience attending the festival, not just that, but being able to travel to other parts of Nigeria, specifically to Benin City. Sometimes you can have a romanticized idea of Africa. Like it's the motherland. It's where every one of us have at least one descendant who walked through the doors or was carried through the doors. It was eye-opening, to say the least. The time I spent in the 2 weeks at Festac gave me kind of like a motivation to want to return in some way. So I took a route that some other artists have taken. I enlisted in the Peace Corps and volunteering to direct a workshop for mentally handicapped youngsters in handicrafts. These were young adults up to about 20 years old who learn how to do leather craft and woodcraft, make dolls and other kind of handicrafts that were sold in the store that this school, the name of it was Jacaranda School. I was able to use my general knowledge of handicrafts to help them out. But it helped me out in so many different ways, and chief among which was that romantic vision of Africa with villages of exotic dances and moonlight strolls and that sort of thing. The motherland that's where we came from, and that's, but it taught me that those people who were desiring to return to Africa, to our ancestral home, it was calling for a little bit more than the spiritual value, that going back with something to help people who needed a lot of help. So I contributed in ways that I could. I could say more about other travels that I made throughout, the other time that I spent there, but that's generally the gist of what it was for me.
You said something that resonates with me deeply, which is that in my current dealings on the continent and, some of the things that I'm building in Ghana, it's just become glaringly apparent that we have to be entering the continent as American people, not following the same model that has been impacted upon Africa. It's always extraction, and so when we go there and we think about building land and buying homes, etc., the conversation has to be, how do we bring resources? How do we improve the quality of life? Somebody that has improved my quality of life or created my quality of life is my mom. She's here. She was at Festac too, so I want to shout her out real quick. I also want to send a major shout out to Nikko Washington's mother, who's here as well. And Nikko Washington's mother really paved the way for a lot of the things we're doing today. Just by being an artist from my earliest memories. And, she would paint these beautiful, elaborate scenes on the walls of Nikko's room. And this is like age, 5 or 6 when Nikko and I first started doing martial arts together. So a lot of your work, oh man, Nikko not right there. Okay, he over there. Yeah, I got this mask on. You know what I mean? A lot of the work that you've been doing incorporates like the practice of martial arts and combat in different ways. The painting that you have right at the entrance is of a group of young black boys blindfolded, apparently fighting with boxing gloves. And then you have the painting of Jack Johnson, who I believe came from that game. Can you tell us about that game that's in the first painting that you see when you enter the show?
So This piece is about the Negro Battle Royale, and what that is a group of, in like the early 1920s, even predated before that to 1930s, late 1930s. What they would do, they would get a group of young, strong black, or even mostly black, primarily black males, and they would have them fight in groups of 5, 6 sometimes, blindfolded with one glove. So a lot of my work revolves around examining racism through the lens of sports. I think if you look at athletics, and it's tied to how we're perceived, tied to eugenics, and tied to this perception of black people that's so deep that as an athletic person, as a person who grew up in martial arts and boxing, I really wanted to examine. But with this piece, it was really interesting because people sometimes volunteered for it because that was like the only way they could get into boxing, was get into a ring, to show their, abilities. So Jack Johnson, we know Jack Johnson from the Great White Hope. He beat everybody in the Negro Battle Royales and became infamous and became actually a heavyweight fighter. So much so that they were trying to oppose him. They tried to put people in front of him to reclaim their whiteness and their power. And he obviously prevailed. But as a martial artist myself, boxing and fighting in general just really stuck to me because it's about the marriage between mind and hand. And as I grew through life, not wanting to be violent, not wanting to be like where I felt as a person who was fighting. I never liked how I felt after one. Wanted to reclaim that or feel that sensation again, but I found it through painting, through the discipline, through my mind and my hand, through finding this painting method, or this practice and this discipline that I would attribute to learning how to fight, learning how to the different movements and how we used to do, to a painting and learning a different technique. So that is sort of like the crux of my work and the main interest, but also just a relearning of our information. It was an interesting point you brought about education, and I really like to paint subjects that I never learned in school and had to relearn or unlearn things that I would put on a pedestal. Like I was really into mythology, but I realized I was only into Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I would idolize these things and learn these, but a lot of them came from Africa. Or a lot of them came from previous stories. What are those stories? Those are the things that interest my work, and I want to put to the forefront and have people get from my practice.
You really answered the question that I was going to ask you, just about how your experience as a martial artist has inspired your experience as a visual artist, and I think that's dope, like mind to hand. I guess I would like to ask you a little bit more about your process of exploring themes of violence, because like we grew up fighting a lot, and we also had discipline, you know what I mean? And I feel like as I've watched you evolve and grow as an artist, you've always had vision, but it is through discipline where I've really seen your style cement itself, and just putting in that time in the gym, you know what I mean? How do you find ways to harness that inclination towards violence in a disciplined way? That's something that I think about with my music a lot, is that I have this nature, you know what I mean? And I'm Gemini, so I have this volatile nature. Don't judge me, you know what I mean? When you say Gemini, people be like trying to run out the back door. You know what I mean? But just thinking about, because it's that intensity that drives me in a lot of my work, but it's also something that with growth and maturity I've had to learn to not be controlled by, you know what I mean? To learn how to harness, you know what I mean, that capacity and power for combat and violence, how to harness that, but not be harnessed by it, if you understand what I'm saying. And I just want to know if that relates in any way to the discipline that you've developed over these years painting? I feel like it's really ramped up in the past few years too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful segue because it's the time in the gym. It's the time of repetition. It's the time of discipline. It's the time of thinking this is a goal of mastery, of being a master at something isn't, it comes from the 10,000 hours or more. It comes from repetition again. And knowing that you are forever a student. I'm forever learning. And there's no ceiling to what I want to learn and implement in my work. So we learned that, our martial art was very skill-based, but it was very technique-based. It was very learning each movement for what it does and what it can do before you moved on to the next, before you put them all together, right? So I look at that as painting as well. Not to say that I have to paint in a certain way, but it's good to learn about these things for as you grow and as you learn, you can take something from everything. And the fact of violence, we live in a very violent city, but America is violent. It's inherently violent. How we brought here, how we came here was violent. And I think it's something that we can't escape, but how we view it is important, and how we can redirect this sort of aggression that we inherently have as black men, as black people. I always felt, but I never really wanted to tap into. It didn't make me feel fulfilled. And I even, as your work, as you were always very disciplined, but also very passionate. And I think sometimes the passion, comes out in a different way, but it's like always in the vein of just passion and pursuit of a goal, right? And I wanted to make sure that goal was visible and something that I can work towards, and something that I could really clear my mind and focus on and meditate on, and also practice at the same time. Really make it something that I can see myself doing forever, for the rest of my life, and that's very therapeutic for me. And obviously therapy is a huge thing that we need, but something that's also therapeutic is really important to bring you back to a state of rest and bring you back to a state of peace, And that's what I want to live. I really want to live a life of peace, and how that comes from is discipline and just knowing, I may be this. It upsets me with these feelings, and how can I redirect it? How can I put it somewhere? Because if not, it's going to destroy me eventually.
Yeah, I love what you said about peace. I was just ruminating on identity, and in recent years I've begun to think about my identity as being a facet of intention. And in the same ways that growing up I considered violence and combat and my experience in those things to be such a crucial part of my identity. And I started to realize, as that constantly damaged my life, that I now make the decision to consider myself as a peaceful person, and that's my decision for my identity. I want to go to something that you said about mastery, though, and direct the question to Terron. Mastery of craft is so important to your work. Just the often hyper realistic nature of some of your work. The talent is undeniable, and the masterful quality of your images lends so much weight to the stories being told. How do you reflect upon the potential and ability of an individual artist's talent to compete with, maybe compete is not the right word because it's, this is art, not sport in the same way, but to live in a world where Jeff Koons has 100,000 studio attendance. As we speak of mastery, there's a brilliant Kerry James Marshall lecture that I listened to, and his show Mastery was my favorite at the MCA ever. And he was speaking about how an artist in this world can, understand themselves and their pursuit in a space where Takashi Murakami has 500 people in the studio. You know what I mean? Being one man with a brush. How do you make sense of that?
Well, it's funny you asked that question because Gerald and I were having a conversation earlier about studio assistants and whether or not you can tell the difference. And to a certain extent, I gotta admit, sometimes you can't. Like Kehinde Wiley's work, as much as I love it, I can't tell the difference from when he's painting and when he has an assistant painting. But I think for me, it's just really personal. Spending the hours with the canvas, touching every square inch of the canvas and knowing that it's exactly the way that you want it. And even if you're having help, just knowing that you're right there and you're a part of that process, and if anything goes awry, you can fix it, I think becomes really important. Especially when in the long run you look back and you can tell that like that's his signature, that's his fingerprint on that canvas, and it's part of the culture.
I wanted to ask you about where you're from, and growing up in Chicago, not having family in the South, and not spending much time in the South, I think that oftentimes in my upbringing, I could look at what's happening in the South as being other from my experience in Chicago. Although Chicago is country as hell, like underneath it all, you know what I mean? Just like living in the North, I think, and in these like major metropolitan areas, sometimes we can exist in a certain bubble. And then I started to really realize that, man, actually, the South is like super America. That's the truth of America. You know what I mean? Like in the best and the worst ways, it's like the South is really the heart of this nation. And so I wanted to ask you about the ways that being from the South has shaped, impacted your identity as a human being and as an artist, because I feel like as human beings, our art is just another limb. You know what I mean? That hand with that brush, that's just your limb. And I feel the same way about my words. It's just an extension of my humanity. And so how is being from the South shaped your humanity?
Yeah, well, we're introduced, I'm sure it's the same here in the Midwest, but we're introduced to propaganda pretty early in the South. I'll start by saying I'm from Portsmouth, Virginia, 757. So, and it's a metropolitan. The difference is that you can travel in Chicago for an hour and you'll still be in Chicago. But from Portsmouth, you can get all the way to Richmond in about an hour, 30 minutes. And so you can see a lot of different kinds of people very quickly where I grew up. People from North Carolina, people from West Virginia, and also from Maryland in the north. So it's the definition of a boiling pot. You see it all. And just to bring it back, like we're taught Virginia history as well as U.S. history, but not a lot about African American or Black history. Surprisingly enough, it's like a very small chapter. So if you want that information, you have to seek it, and that was very strange for me growing up, because I know a lot of us might have went through that emo phase or this, like that goth phase, and for me that was kind of like a rejection of my history and my culture. Because I didn't know better. I didn't know where I came from. It's one of those frustrations and kind of why I idealize going to Africa and wanting to spend time there. So yeah, I'd say growing up in the South is probably pretty similar to here.
Man, that actually segues into the next thing I want to ask you, which is about some of your recent work from, I believe it was your Steve Turner show, where you were painting the Dogon subjects. And man, I mean, those images are just so striking. And some of the dances and the rituals that you were recreating in your practice are deeply powerful spiritual experiences, and growing up, with so many people in my life that are heavily Christian, but having the ancestral background that I do, there's a lot of friction and disconnect between our understanding as Black Americans of religion and also as Africans, and our ancestral understanding of religion. So my grandfather's official religion was Vodun. He passed away before I was ever born, but at my grandmother's funeral, I was just so entranced when I looked at the paper and I read his name, and it said that his official religion was Vodun, which was transported across the Middle Passage to become Voodoo of Haiti and Louisiana, etc. Studying the Vodun and attending some of these rituals in Ghana, things that my Christian cousins and my uncle are like, Juju, stay away. You know what I mean? So I wanted to ask you about your experience translating, some of those powerful Dogon rituals to canvas, because the Dogons are extremely spiritual, powerful people, that would definitely be called Juju. They definitely Juju.
Yeah, if you haven't seen these rituals performed, definitely take a look. And I get what you're saying, because if you're a foreigner and you didn't know what was going on, you would be very confused. But a lot of what they're doing is connecting us here in the earth, and they want to connect that to the eternal or the infinite. And so a lot of it's love for the sky, love for the ground, and how can we connect those two things. And so you'll see people on stilts, you'll see people with these very tall masks, not unlike that there. And there also will be representations of animals and things like that. And it's funny because a lot of these, a lot of their stories have made their way into our culture too. Like you have Burr Rabbit and things like that. It's all love for nature, and once you understand it, you're like, wow, I can actually really connect to this. And I've always loved dancing, and it's like it comes so natural to them. It comes natural to me. There's a reason for this, and it was just interesting to learn more about that culture and to actually record it on canvas.
I often reflect upon the inherent Africanness of Black people in America. Obviously, the divide between us has been manufactured and implanted deep into our psyche by colonialism and propaganda. But even when we did the launch for the show, and I had Little Bit wearing this mask, footworking, to a brother playing a djembe drum, it was because, what's more African than footworking? You know what I mean? Or the bucket boys. Like sometimes I just see these things that are so present in our culture that we may not always think of as being African, you know what I mean? But are just deeply ingrained in our DNA. When I think about those rituals, some of the things that you've been painting, I think the most effective way to make a human being hate themselves is, to make them hate the gods of their fathers, to discard their own names, hate their own physical features. I wanted to direct the next question to Mia, who's on my right. Okay. Ever since high school, you've always been an extremely stylish person with a, just
Really?
yeah, brilliant style of dress.
I wear
That's what I
uniform
thought.
for like 8 years, but thank you.
That's what I thought. Maybe I was tweaking.
No, not me. Thank you though.
But in your work, one of the things that has always caught my attention primarily is your use of clothing on your subjects. And I feel like it's so expressive, and even thinking about, some of the paintings I was talking about of Terron's, some of the illest stuff that he does would be like in the clothing of the subjects that he paints. And I wanted to ask you, in what ways do you seek to express your own identity and the identity of your subjects through their clothing and the things they wear? As I was concepting this conversation, I was thinking about the masks we wear. Do you think that, that front-facing aesthetic direction can be kind of like a mask that people and your subjects may wear?
So I'm gonna preface this with, I'm talking to everybody, but mostly Black women. So I love y'all. Shout out to y'all. And okay. So we're gonna take this back to the era of them franchise boys and name belts and jersey dresses. Okay, let me start there. It's gonna make sense. So follow me, right? Okay. So I'm from 79th and Cottage Grove, born and raised. If you don't know where that fun is, just pull up Google Maps and it'll tell you everything that you need to know. So I used to go to the Bud Billiken Parade, which is like a back to school parade, mostly like, Black students and they families, and it's like massive thing. So it was amazing. So I ritually went there like with my bad cousins. My mama used to dress me in Gap for a very long time in my life. And when I transitioned to baby fat, it was a very pivotal moment for me because that's when I got to appreciate baby hairs. Stay with me. By the time I was in elementary school, like going to like high school, heavily into the beauty supply. In my neighborhood, it'd be like 10 of them, like all of them right there, and a Sharks. So I used to just be in there like heavily, like, $5 in my pocket, but I'm about to get 10 things. So, magnet earrings, all of that. But me, since I'm like into like my edges now, I'm always getting headscarves and laying I tie my hair down. Y'all get it. Because of that ties into fast forward. I started making something that truly resonates with me. Everything I make is not for anyone or anybody who just doesn't get it. Like if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. I wanted to really make tangible things in clothing because I used to be scared like people don't buy art. I want to really be invested in doing art, but like people want to buy clothes, I don't want to make t-shirts. So I just make these scarves. So, like here. If you look at that young lady in a green top right there, she has one too. So I call, okay, everybody.
What about me? How everybody got one, I ain't got one.
Okay, so those I have called silkies, right? So it's basically, that's where it started off, but everyone has been, rocking it the same way, like around the neck, like stuff like that, like very, very stylish ways and stuff like I've never imagined like how it would blow up. And it all started because of the beauty supply. And it's just like, that's all I know. I used to stay in there every day. I'm getting a rat tail comb. So it's like, yeah, I wore a uniform. I was telling you, I'm not stylish. I wore a uniform every day. The only thing I used to buy is the colored belt. That's all I used to do. So it's just like everything I know is tied to beauty supply. And that's what I know. So I tie that into my characters, and I don't only focus on Black women, but they are the pivotal subject of my work because that's what I know. I dress them in reflection of what I know, and that is tight dresses, the jersey dresses, what I'm saying? Like, things that we have grown up wearing and stuff like that because it's natural, it's normal to us. You go to, the Art Institute, and they got on them ball gowns, and they got on them corsets and stuff like that, and they just like pale. You know what I'm saying? So like, that's not what I know, My family Black, my mama Black, I'm raised like everybody I know is Black. I was raised in 79th and Cottage Grove, right? And Chicago is very segregated. And no offense, but I didn't meet a white person until I went to college. it's just that segregated. And like, I didn't go anywhere really, so it's like I stayed in my hood. I went to the park, and that's not my fault. Like, blame the mayor or everybody else. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, blame the government. Like,
Always
I wish I can go to
mayor.
another school. I was supposed to go to Whitney Young, but like, that's too far. And like, you gotta take the train and the bus, and that was like a journey. So like, it's because of Black women and because of what I know, who I've been raised by, and what I've seen, what I feel. I love it. I adore it, and that's why. I think I answered the question.
Swag. Mic drop. That felt like that Lil Wayne intro to that song where he was like, go to the next question. The beauty supply store. Very influential place.
25 cents.
No, very influential place. I also love beauty supply stores. And at the same time, I experienced a lot of racism in the beauty supply store. You know, I definitely recall the beauty supply store that we used to go to on 51st Street, across the street from Kenwood, and how I'd be in there, you know, when I had the big afro, and, you know, looking for afro pics. And I remember the first time I'm being followed around the store by the woman, and she's like, you know, literally hurry up and buy. And, you know, assuming that I was going to steal, and I wasn't even trying to steal yet, you know, but once she kept, you feel me, badgering me about stealing, I'm like, yeah, I'm stealing.
Like, now I'm really finna
I'm
steal.
stealing everything out this motherfucker. You know, thinking about it, in retrospect, I feel that maybe her perception of Black people or young Black boys was as a monolith, you know what I mean, as a homogenous group that is all expected to act in one way, all based off skin. And that kind of brings me to the other thing I wanted to ask you, which was about your decision to paint the skin of many of your subjects as like jet black. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to ask you your motivation in doing that.
A lot of artists that I admired do that. And my grandmother is a member of most museums and stuff like that. And she used to take me a lot. So I'm at the MCA, Art Institute, like I said, very pale paintings of pale people. And I never really noticed that. Like, I never really like took into account, like as a kid, it's just like, everything's cool. Like it's the same. But getting older and really stepping into like who I am as a person, and like I mentioned before, like painting on what I know. And because I spent most of my life around Black people, that's what I'm gonna do. My set of grandparents on my mother's side is from Rotan, which is in the Caribbean Sea. It's like off of Honduras. And then my other grandparents are from Alabama. When my grandmother on my mama's side passed away, I didn't really know much about her. Like, I spent a lot of time around her, but I didn't really know her like that. When she passed, I was like, damn. Like, who was like what was your life like? You know, like you immigrated. What was that like? But I didn't know. I don't ever know. So now with my other grandma, she's super active. Like she's tapped in. Like, I asked her so many questions, like about like being in Alabama and going to Tuskegee. She graduated. Like, she got a degree in piano. Like, she's really into it. And so because of that, like, I just asked my grandma, like, who are you? And stuff like that. So, like, she really wanted to get into, like, her family tree. I was like, this is about to take forever, but let's do it. So, and this is before 23andMe and, like, all that. Like, we on Google, like, I don't know, man. I don't know where to start. But we're just, like, trying to build that connection. And I just learned so much. And because of these stories, I've created more narratives to paint off of. Their Black experience, because they're Black women, and because they grew up in the South, and the only interaction that they have with white people was horrible. So I don't really paint on like white experiences and interactions like that. I do like emotions of white people, like our the delicacies of relationships. Like, are we happy with each other? Like, are we sad? Like, are we fighting? Like, stuff like that. Like, let's talk about it. So the black skin is because I have all the intent on lifting and putting us in space like that we recognize and that we don't have to look at pale faces all day. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, I use black because black is the richest color of all the colors. It is deep, it is intense, you can feel it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go to the party and that bitch got on all black, you like, I like her. You know what I'm saying? You see her in the bathroom and you talk to her in the bathroom for like 30 minutes and your friends looking for you, like y'all like really connect because it's just like, you get it. That's why I do it. I mean, you know, Kerry James Marshall does it, like Nina Chanel Abney does it, like I'm gonna do it too, because I have the intent, and it's and it's out of love, appreciation, and it's not all that goofy shit all them other people been doing back in the day. Like, we not doing that no more, okay? So, like, and since I am going places for sure, like, I'm gonna make sure like we always represent it, and that's why.
Straight up. Andrea, I want to ask you about memories and the way that you use them in your paintings. People like to think that they have their memories as if memories are concrete things. But your paintings remind us that memories aren't something solid that we just have or are given. They're something that we construct. It's often a mixture of fact and fiction. In that context, is the constructed nature of memory related to the constructed nature of history? And how do you use memory in your imagery?
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, for me, I always tell people, like, I was the nosy black girl in the table, where I listened to all the grown folks' conversations. They was, who they was out with when Al Green was playing, how so-and-so acted over there. And I was someone that grew up with a mother that was, like, the truth. Everyone told her the truth. I don't know if you got this, black folks know what I'm talking about the person in your family that everyone goes to about personal information, stuff that's traumatizing. And that's like the teacher of someone to give you advice, the Marriott of the family. I had that, and I think I was very privileged in having that, but I took it as being some type of storyteller in my life, and just hearing these oral stories of Mama Beatty and Papa Eddie and all the people in my life that were kind of made up of me and this fabric of me that I didn't really meet at all, or I didn't see, but they were the reflection of the people that I've seen presently and through myself as well. My work started through just reflecting upon myself as a black artist and what that was and what that meant within, like, the universities and schools where I only saw two of me and what that meant. And I wanted to make it known that black people exist, and they were the reason why I was here and I was able to persevere in a sense. So the way I use memory in my works and how the things that I use, it's based on the oral stories that I've heard. If you go to one black person or your mama, they got a perspective about old girl over there, or your grandmama, that, this particular moment in time. And then you go to your auntie, and it's a whole different story. And then you go to your uncle, and it's a whole different story. And then you go to your cousin, and that's a whole different story. So it was just this layering of memory that was recopied and recopied, but it had layers to it that was not just two-dimensional. It was three-dimensional, and it gave, like, value into the lives of the people that raised me. And I believe in honoring those people and painting them above and beyond the white walls, because it is about them, and it's the reason why I'm here. And I wanted to give back to them in that way and commemorate them. Like, Mia, like, I grew up with my grandmother, and she was the realest I ever known. It's a lot of people that couldn't handle the truth that she had or gave, and I believe I took that truth and I passed it down, and I continue to pass it down and give it to the people that needed to hear it. And she gave it to me, and when we talking about the South and things like that, it still travels with me. I think it's within the fabric, it's within the skin, it's within the vernacular and the way you say things, that it never leaves you and it never will. As black women, as black experiences that you've had throughout your life, we are of our own. We have our own style, regardless if it is realistic or stylish, or something in terms of like Greek mythology. We make it our own, and it passes it down to the next generation, and that's something that I'm working on to kind of carve this groove, because you're going to continue to hear about us regardless, if you like it or not. So I think that's how I use memory, as just this repeating thing, and it happens to be very universal, and it triggers people, and I'm always here to trigger folks to get into the meat of things. I know Black folks, we always healing, and you have to be triggered to heal.
Bars. You mentioned something that I want to turn into a question to pose to the group, and that is about your time in school that I assume was art school. Sound like it. I often wonder about experience in school, and as a visual artist, how one as a Black artist comes to terms with the fixation and study of all of these white masters. I mean, they literally call them the masters, you know what I mean? And their work is what is often positioned as having a monopoly on master works, you know what I mean? And so when they speak of the master works, they don't speak of the Benin bronzes and, the seminal creations of African artists that often inspired these European masters, such as Picasso, etc. So this is something I pose to the group, like as a Black artist that studies art and, learns so much from and often like imitates, as we all do as artists in a process of learning these white masters. Like how do you rationalize that with your own practice and like wanting to represent yourself, but so much of what you study is belonging to a culture that has been exclusive, that has excluded the contributions of your people to the realm of fine art? I'm about to take this mask off, yeah.
My people was from Alabama, Mississippi. They came to Chicago, and they bounced and like wanted to make a home for themselves within the white masses of suburbs and planted themselves there. So I didn't grow up on anything other than, Black shows, black people, Black stories, Black dance. And so I went to college, and, it was a lot of passive aggressive behavior. And I didn't know what that was and what they meant, because I grew up with, people that told the truth of what it was and was very blunt. I couldn't rationalize it. And I think it's the simplest way of saying it. There was no rationalization about what this white person was and what they mastered, because I couldn't master what he mastered, and I didn't understand why he was a master in the first place, because it looked the same as everything else that I seen. And it had no originality to it. So I pivoted from it anyhow. I tried, of course. I tried to, let me paint, of course, this is where the value is. But my process chose me, and I went with that. And I think that's how my intuitiveness within my practice persevered, and it prolonged, and it actually touched the people around me that it needed to touch, because I didn't force to be in this like square of Black notability and what it means to be the master. I'm a master of my own, and I'm master of my family that I want to represent and honor, because they're just as important as all the white faces that you've seen in the museums over and over again, and have more value and more originality and more soul and more richness than anybody, and that's just the Black fabric of things. So I didn't rationalize it to make it simple.
No, I love what you said, because in my experience at the Art Institute, we would walk through the museum to go to school. And history is always told by the victor, right? the pieces that they are glorifying are the pieces that look like them. It's the studies and techniques that they were told was the highest form of art, right? So they're gonna keep passing that down. In my class, I remember being, almost every class I was the only black person. And every subject matter that I had to do, I felt like I had to have a teaching moment, because at the end of the day, I remember Mike Brown was murdered, and I was in school and I did a piece about it. And I felt like I was forced to, because if I didn't do it, we wouldn't have talked about it in class. All this was happening around me, but my America was different. My reality, my Twitter feed was only pictures of trauma. Theirs was only pictures of everything else. Like, they were doing pieces about what this color green meant to them, you know? And I feel like I had to bring this up in class. I was always the one, if I didn't do it, you know, we wouldn't speak about it. And I felt like I didn't want to be a political artist or be labeled as like, you know, political, you know, blah, blah, and box into that. But I think being black in America is inherently political, and we have a responsibility. Even without even trying, our work means something deeper than on the surface what it is. Like, the black skin tones have so much weight beyond just the color. So I remember just having to, again, just unlearn and really appreciate our art and my art for what it was and what it wasn't. And never try to emulate, because at the end of the day, you know, they're going to judge it based off that, and they give us the term outsider artist if it's outside of, you know, the realms of traditional techniques that they feel like we need to learn. You know, it's institutionalized. It's an institution, but it's very institutionalizing, a way of thinking, and that spits out sort of what they want the world to be. And I had to just look at that. But it was, like you were saying, it was just, the practice comes to you, the work comes to you. I am reactionary. Something happened, I felt forced to react to it, you know, and that's how the work came out. It wasn't like I was trying to do it, it was like I felt the need to do it. So, yeah, that's my experience.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this with describing my mother. So Miss Delisa Lee grew up in a no-nonsense household, and she went to Dunbar Academy, so that's a no-nonsense school, so she's just built like that. My school, my elementary school, I remember, I told this story at another event she was at. So in 4th grade or 3rd grade, one of those two, an assignment we did, when I turned it in, like the next day, my teacher, she pulled me to the side, and there was a desk in the corner, and she put a piece of paper down and a pencil. She was like, I need you to redraw this, because I need to make sure like you did that. And I was like, whoa, okay. And like, I grew up drawing and painting and stuff like that. So I'm like, whoa, like, you think I'm a fraud? Like, that's crazy. Fast forward to that night, talking to my mama, I told her what she did, and my mom was like, oh, okay, bet. Next day, show was up at that school, and she said, oh, where's Miss Shear? Let's talk. Long story short, I've never been asked to draw nothing again. So I went to U of I for school. I studied costume design, and the theater is right here where all the workers are in the basement. You know, no sunlight, no windows, you know, just there every day at 7:30 a.m. Art is very subjective. So it's crazy that we're getting graded on it. But I'm not offended by it, because I've never gotten a good grade by it. Like, I'm gonna do me. I got like my grades back, and they were like, we want to talk to you. First of all, I got a D, and I was like, whoa, I was going crazy. So what happened here? And she was like, well, you come in and you have your headphones on and you don't talk to anybody. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I got my headphones, I got my hood on my head. Like, yes, I know that. It's 7:30 in the morning. I do not want to talk to y'all. What are we gonna talk about? They were like, okay, let's think about your future. I had to talk to the dean, and the dean was like, unfortunately, I think that we should reconsider like your place in this program, because we don't think it's just a fit. I'm like, who said that? Apparently, all the teachers felt like they never told me that. So I guess they just, you know, talking behind, like, you know, like never approached me, like trying to like, I'm great on criticism. You know, I'm not offended, but I love it. That's how I grow. But nobody talked to me. Nobody told me anything. She said that I need to, you know, maybe I need to take a year off or whatever. That was a conversation about me getting kicked out the program. And I was like, you know what? So I cried. Yeah, I cried because I was offended, and I was just like, whoa, what? Like, it's like, what? I did not expect that. It really caught me off guard. I paid just, $20,000 a year to just, like, let me go? Like, I'm paying you. Like, what? Like, I'm staying here. But no, it didn't happen like that. And so I cried a little bit, walked around campus, and I was like, damn, what am I about to do? And basically, I just transferred. I called up another school, and I was like, hey, I'm in this program. Do y'all take transfer? And they was like, oh, yeah. Went to UIC. Before they kicked me out, I left. So I did finish off with costume design and stuff like that. But, that experience really taught me to obviously speak my mind. And, like, if I don't like something, I'm not going to do it. And if you don't like what I'm doing, what type of work I'm doing, like, that's on you. And, well, okay, that's it. I just, unlearned it. I unlearned everything. I got my mom in the back of my head, like, fuck them. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, you like, fuck them. So I know, I'm going to keep that energy, like, forever. And, got to make her proud. So, yeah, that's what I do.
That makes me think about, a lot of experiences that I've had in school that I kind of want to bring to my last prompt for the group, and then we're going to open it up for a couple questions from the audience. My earliest memories of school were being put in a developmentally challenged class in kindergarten by Miss Clement at Ray School. Of course I do. For my behavior, you know what I mean? Because I didn't like to share. And I mean, this is something that happens to Black kids in school so often, that our intelligence is deemed to be lesser than because we're not understood by our largely white teachers. And so as I look at my history in school, I was always at odds with the teachers. I got suspended pretty much once a year, you know what I mean, for increasingly long lengths as I got older. One of the most challenging principles of the book Black Skin, White Masks, for me, has been Frantz Fanon's assertion that in order to fully realize our humanity, in his eyes, we have to almost let race go. You know what I mean? Like, we have to let go of Black. We have to let go of white. And I find that to be so difficult sometimes because in my mind, and in reality, so much harm has been impacted upon me and upon my friends and family and ancestors in the name of race, in the name of whiteness, and in the name of Blackness. As I was putting this show together, myself and one of the artists, Daryl Wesley, were having a conversation around the time when that shooter went into the grocery store full of Black people. And, like I'm sure a lot of people in here, I was like, okay, cool, let's arm ourselves, create militias right now, you know what I mean, and think about how we retaliate. So I was watching Spook Who Sat by the Door. I'm going to end it with this, you know what I mean? In my words. I was watching Spook Who Sat by the Door yesterday, and one of the illest things in there was Sam Greenlee's character, who's in Spook Who Sat by the Door, is arming and organizing a group of young Black gang members in Chicago in the 60s to take revolutionary action against the United States government, teaching them guerrilla tactics and covert warfare. And at a point in time, he's talking to one of the young brothers, and the brother's like, I hate white people. I hate everything about them. And Sam Greenlee's character was like, that's not going to get us where we need to go, in so many words. Hatred is not a powerful enough force for us to overcome what we face, and in their case, and I think in our case, all of our case as human beings, but especially as Black people, it has to be our striving for freedom above all else, and our love for freedom above all else that can take us where we need to be. You know, it's just hatred is not powerful enough. So I guess I pose this to anybody that wants to answer real quick, and then we'll bring some questions from the crowd. Like, how do you in your practice weigh your desire for freedom against and with, you know, your resentments, your anger, you know what I mean, your hatred that could exist, and like, how does that dynamic show up for you?
I just want to go back to something that you said about, first of all, about learning from the master. How do you feel about going to school and studying the masters? And as a student, you can't possibly know until you have gone through that and found out what you can take from the master's learning. I mean, there are so many exceptions to that. You know, people who, hey, they become innovative and successful without dealing with that route. You know, there's a circuitous route you can take around all of it and become immensely successful and purposeful. And it's kind of inefficient to go through that whole process and say, I don't like none of it, so screw it. You know, I'm just going to do like I did, which wasn't bad. I mean, you know, I'm sitting here in a group of people who are maybe two of them, I'm twice their age, at least. Frantz Fanon was 36 years old when he wrote Black Skin, White Mask. And he was able to develop a tremendous consciousness about all of that. How would he view things 50 years from the year that he died in 1962? How would he view the changes that took place from his age, from the age in which he lived? Artists generally reflect the age in which they live. There's no rule that says anybody has to do that, but generally, when you're creating, producing, and looking around, you see the things and hear the things that are going on around you, and in some way, those things may be infused in the work that you do. The spirit of the age was something that we didn't think about doing, but it's something that you look back on in retrospect, and the historians and the critics and all those other people who write, the philosophers, they look back and say, well, the spirit of that age in the 1960s was this way, that way, or the other. You know, it produced a lot of creative people whose work reflects the spirit of that particular age. And one artist I can think of, you may have heard about, and to me, kind of like epitomizes the spirit of that age, where I became more conscious about things going on around me, was Marvin Gaye. If you've ever listened to his monumental work, What's Going On, Marvin Gaye created a work that, in my opinion, because other people I've discussed this with feel totally different. They feel like somebody else's work reflects that period better than Marvin Gaye. But Marvin Gaye sings and tells about everything that was going on: love, hate, war, religion, And it's all within the most monumental piece of it. It's up there with oratorios as not a benchmark for creativity and productivity, but it's on that level. But it begs a question: what work today symbolizes or encapsulates the spirit of this age, 2072, 50 years from now? What will the philosophers and the historians and professors in art institutes talk about in front of their students? What work of Vic Mensa?
That's what we making now.
Okay.
Bro.
Okay. Remember, I said you don't know that. You don't know that.
I feel confident.
You're not supposed to know it. But you get the point anyway, and I hope that contributes to the discussion somewhat.
We a little bit over. If anybody's dying to ask a question, we can open it up. You want to ask one? Go ahead. Let's do it. Just gonna keep it quick.
So I think about a lot of times when you talk about Black art, it's a lot of times in relation to whiteness, and like the progression of Blackness and Black art is in relation to whiteness. But I wonder if you all as artists think about your art in relation to Blackness and how we move Black community forward. What does that look like if you reframe the type of work you do within Black community and Black space? Because we're in a really precarious time.
I'm sorry, I was just say one quick thing real quick, because it relates to your previous question. I love that question. And I was thinking, like, not viewing ourselves as the other, right? When we make our work, not viewing ourselves as the outlier or some sort of like, and our work is mostly in response to something, right? And curating a new conversation around something could help, to spawn our own narrative of in this country of ourselves. And I think that's what you said was really dope, and I really love the connection to you. I know we over time, so please go ahead.
Well, well said. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's about not othering ourselves and having our own narrative and believing that we can do it. We can be a people, And I think that's lost sometimes. But if we keep reiterating that, that's when it'll start.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna wrap this thing up right now, you know what I mean? Much appreciation and love to everybody in the building.